Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Maria Gonçalves podcast. I'm your host, Maria Gonçalves. Today, I have my co-host, Dana Louise, all the way from Australia. So, welcome, Dana.
Hi, everyone. Once again, just so excited to be here. And we've got a fantastic guest this evening, I should say, that I'm really looking forward to chatting with.
Yes. So, welcome, Minister Simone Key. So, welcome today.
Hello. Hi,
And
and
just
thank you
so
so much for asking me to join you.
I'm super excited you're here. So, just to let our listeners know a little bit about you, she is a tutor for 3 decades at the prestigious Arthur Findlay College and teaches a trance mediumship, spiritual healing, and evidential mediumship. She is always endeavors to help support and encourage individuals whose desire is to become a worthy ambassador for the spirit world. So I'm super excited you are here. One of my questions is, um, were you always a medium?
Um, I'm not sure. I can't. I'm not sure about how to answer that. Um, I didn't. I really didn't think so because I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
um, I know that mediumship happened to me almost overnight, um, and uh, I was very much an atheist, and I really, really didn't want it. I can assure you. But the more the spirit world worked with me, the more they showed me this was my path, if you like. And now I'm a minister, which is a complete turnaround, from being an atheist, So, but I I I really didn't want to do that. Um I always thought I was a bit too down to earth, to be honest. I thought mediumship was very airy fairy. So
Simone, can I ask, how does one go from being an atheist to then a medium to then a minister? How did that happen?
Well,
If you can just tell
I'm
listeners.
not sure for most for me it's so difficult to talk about because I can't understand it myself. Um, but to go from from this atheist that didn't believe, I always believed that life is what you make of it, and that when it's your time, when you're dead, you're dead. Um, but it was over a period of about a few months where the spirit world was doing so much to try and convince me of opening my mind and seeing that there was more to life, basically. And just to share one very, very quick experience, of a very good friend of mine, who also worked at the Arthur Findlay College, but she's in the spirit world now, name's Muriel Tennant. And we live fairly near each other. And when I met her, she's one of the first people I met within spiritualism. And she'd written a book called As I See It. And she wanted someone to type her book. And I said, yeah, we just met. And I said, yeah, I can type your book. My background's secretarial. So I got her book, and I got this incredibly huge word processor at the time. We are going back to the very early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And it was like the forerunner of the computer, but it had a one-line screen. And it was late at night, and I was typing a book, and I was thinking, should I go to bed or should I continue? And I thought, no, I'll get it finished. And all of a sudden, the carriage return just kept crashing. I'm cutting a long story short, and it was scary. And I kept thinking, what have I done to the machine? I wasn't thinking about anything else. I just thought, I've broken it. And then when I looked at the screen, it said, we must communicate, but I hadn't typed those words. And that was the start, really, of my life with the spirit, really.
Oh, wow. Did you communicate back?
No, I went to bed. I was terrified. No, but that was the sort of start of it, really. And then my son was very young, and he was, I think, 2.5 or something like that. And a friend of mine said to me, you need to go and see a medium. And I said, well, where do you find one? They're not in the yellow pages. We did have the yellow pages in those days. And she told me of a local medium, and I went to see this medium anyway. And again, she told me a lot of information, which I'd have to tell you, I didn't even listen to. I was just so scared. And at the end, she said to me, "You have a son." And then, of course, the mother instinct in me came out, where I was very protective. And she said, "You know, you have a little son." And she said, "He's very chatty, but he doesn't talk to himself. He has a play friend called Irene, who's from the spirit world." I didn't want to hear that. I really didn't. And then she told me that my daughter had a doll's pram, and that she liked, this girl in the spirit world liked to play with the doll's pram, So anyway, I went home and I said to him, "Do you ever play with a little girl called Irene?" And he said, "Yes." I was expecting him to say no. I wanted him to say no. And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Do you like her?" And he said, "I please her, mummy. My children don't speak to me like that. And I said, "Well, what do you do when you play with her?" And he's got a little bicycle three-wheeler, and he was going, "I go brum brum," and all of that. And then I said, "Well, what does Irene do?" He said, "She always plays with the pram." And that's what convinced me, because you cannot indoctrinate a 2-year-old.
Wow.
That's how it all started. So the spirit world had to work really hard on me. I'm going to be honest. They did. I think they picked the short straw. But
so having found that, Simone, did you then go on to join a circle, or how does that look in the UK?
It's a bit of a story, because I did go on to join circles. I actually joined 2, and I was expelled from both after the first day, because I asked too many questions. And they didn't want me back because they thought I was challenging them, and I wasn't. I really wanted to know. I didn't know anything, and I wanted to know. And so from then on, I had to find my own way. And I am actually quite grateful, to be honest. And in retrospect, I can see that I wasn't ever going to fit in with a group, because, I don't conform very easily. And I think we must be free thinkers. And I think the only way to progress is to ask questions. And if somebody doesn't want you to ask questions, they're not going to help me or anyone else, to be honest. So anyway, in the end, I started just to sit on my own, and I went to the college, and I went with certain tutors as a student, and I started to develop on my own, and that's how I did it. That was my way.
So, Simone, you mentioned you went to the college yourself, where you ended up teaching and having quite a career there. Was there any one particular influence that you had that really changed or helped you develop? Everyone seems to have that one mentor, that one standout mentor.
Mine was Glyn Edwards. He was an amazing individual. He was a medium, of course, but he was the most amazing speaker. And I have a great love of good speakers. I love listening to people with a lot of knowledge and understanding, and he was the one that did it for me. And I sort of followed him. I wasn't haunting him, but I was following him for a long time. And then I ended up, I'm very privileged, because I worked with Glyn for a few years until his passing. But it was amazing.
Because he was quite a forward thinker in his time, wasn't he? He had that expansive. He wasn't contained or limited. I've got a number of his books here, and I love them, because they're, even in the time that they were written, there was a freedom in his thinking that encouraged the questioning of reaching out and reaching your spiritual potential as such. So how would you say that that's affected your teaching? I
think how he affected me was to follow my own mind and my own heart, not to just accept that everybody else was right, because everybody's not right for everybody, but what he did was show me that you can be a free thinker and still be part of this movement of spiritualism, which I am. I am part of that movement, and I can't ever imagine a time when I'm not going to be a spiritualist. But I know that's not for everybody. I'm just talking about how I see it, and I think that's how he helped me. And he helped me examine things that people say for instance, something that's uppermost in my mind at the moment that people say all the time, and I'm sure I've said it too. People say things like, we choose our parents before we come here. You must have heard that, because I think everybody's heard it, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I want some proof of that, because I've never, ever, ever seen any proof of that. So that's one of my things at the moment. I just want to, it's not the fact that I don't believe it, but okay, but show it to me, prove it to me that we choose, because there's no proof out there at all. But we all say it, and we've all thought it.
Oh, that's so fascinating. I never even thought of that. I will, for myself, I am that student that makes some of my mentors a little bit crazy, because I have to question everything. And I like that you encourage people to be skeptic, to ask questions, because that's part of learning. So I am curious, because I do know there is a lot of fear out there with trance mediumship. So can you speak to that?
Well, I've been there. I will say that, because my experience of trance before I started to go into trance myself hadn't been a very good one, to be honest. I'd seen people in trance that really scared the life out of me. The way they looked, the way their mannerisms, their gestures, even their facial expressions looked to me really scary, and I didn't want to look like that. And so and then you get people who are always saying, you've got to pray for protection, and then the fear, and I remember even being told things like, you mustn't have an open door to the spirit. You've got to be quite selective who you allow close to you. I actually think that's the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard. Honestly, I do now, but at the time I didn't know any different, So I was thinking, well, how do I know who's here? How do I know who's influencing my mind? How do I know? And I know that the whole basis of trance and every area of mediumship is like attracts like. So if you think that people who want the same as you, or even more than you, are joining you to help you to express them. That's what it's about. So for me, I can understand skepticism, because I've been there. I understand that, we've got to find out for ourselves. That's the most important thing. Learn from everyone, but find out for yourself. And be true to yourself as well. Because I can think back to all those years ago when I started as a trance medium, and that different understanding I had, that I've got now. And that's okay, because you wouldn't teach an infant university maths. We've all got to learn in our own way. And I'm quite okay with that now. But it is hard, because you think, I'm opening my mind. What am I opening my mind to? And I promise you, if I believed that the spirit world had the potential to do one person in my world harm, I wouldn't be here today. That's not what I believe in. That's not the world that I work with. And so, that's why I know that it's right for everyone, because we're still spirit now, regardless of whether we can communicate or not. We're spirit here and now, and we are in communication with that world, even if we're not conscious of it. But subconsciously or unconsciously, we communicate with that world.
Yeah, because I know there is this misconception out there, because I heard it in the beginning, because I was like, oh, I want to try trance, but I don't really know. And then I would hear other mediums like, oh, you got to watch out. They're going to take over your body. You're going to get
absolutely. And
I was like, what?
It's absolutely nothing to do with the body. It's all about mind. It's mind to mind. It's nothing to do with the physical body at all. I mean, sometimes the energy of the spirit can have an effect on the body, because it has an effect on the nervous system, because communication works through the nervous system, it works through the subconscious mind. And we in turn, translate that thought into the conscious mind, that's how it works. But it has nothing to do with possession. I mean, I actually believe that if you change the word possession to obsession, you're nearer the truth.
So, Simone, for our listeners, is there different levels or states of trance?
Yes, I think so. I think that, for instance, if I take it from, say, when we're working in communication, with, say, evidential mediumship, you can be in a hold of the spirit, and it can, because we know that if I was giving you a message from the spirit world, that if I start to think of something else, I've lost it in more ways than one, but I've lost it, and therefore I have to be, disciplined, focused, not able to think of anything else, if I want to do the best I can for you. So that is a kind of, it's not a deep hold, of course, but it's incredibly light hold, but it's still a control, which is why we call trance in the movement controlled mediumship, because the spirit world controls our thinking with our consent, by the way, That's how it works. And then, when we go into the trance state itself, the degrees of trance are that we can be in a light hold. For instance, if I'm working with, say, trance healing, I know that my trance state is going to be a lot lighter, because that's where it's more effective for that kind of mediumship. However, if I was going into the trance state and the spirit decided they wanted to speak philosophy through me, for whatever reason, I know that vocabulary has an energy. And as we say those words, the energy of the vocabulary takes us further and further into a deeper state of consciousness. So, so if I look at the things that I do, like I do, trance speaking, which is the philosophy, I do trance healing, I do trance communication, where loved ones speak directly to loved ones through me. And then I do what I call trance guidance, trance spiritual assessments, but they're all at different states of consciousness that are more suitable to that type of mediumship.
If I can ask, what's the difference of being overshadowed and being in trance?
I think personally that a lot depends on every individual's understanding of those two aspects. Personally, when somebody talks to me, now I actually don't think we use the expression overshadowed anymore. I haven't heard it for a very, very long time. But however, I know that people still do, and I believe, this is my opinion, of course, but based on my experience, that when you're overshadowed is when there's that closeness of spirit where you become someone or you become them. That's the way. It's the closeness, basically, closeness in blending.
So a working medium, is it possible to spontaneously fall into a state of trance and not be quite aware of that?
It has happened to me on the first time. Very often when trance starts, it may be some years before the medium decides to go into the trance state, and then but the spirit world is working behind the scenes. And I remember distinctly talking to a friend of mine who's also a spiritualist, and we were just sitting together in the power, and all of a sudden she saw it within me, not me physically, but within me stepping back and allowing the spirit to come to the fore of my mind and speak very, very quickly, because they knew I'd mess it up if they didn't. I'm sure of that. And it was just literally for a few seconds, but it was all about preparing you for the future and taking away those myths and fears, making sure that you're comfortable and relaxed with them. But it's always about the relationship you have with your own spirit team. It's always about that. It's always about the harmony that you develop with you. And, and remembering it's a partnership. It's not just you and them. It's a partnership. And it works when you support and encourage them as they support and encourage you. But it's the way you work in harmony with it.
I'm so intrigued by it. So for the student that's just starting out, how would you explain the feeling of the trance state? So they can get an essence or an idea of what that is like to experience as their mind moves or their body softens?
Right. Okay. Well, first and foremost, the hardest thing is to relax, but you have to be relaxed and you have to lose awareness of self. So once, when you're starting, you are going to be aware of your body, you are going to be aware of your breathing change, because when everything slows down, when your thinking slows down, automatically your heart slows down. So you don't breathe so much. And if you watch mediums, trance mediums, I mean, at the end of the trance, you'll always see them taking a big breath. It's not that they're running out of, air, but it's just the fact that they've needed so little, because everything within them has slowed down. They're, as I say, their breathing, their thinking, their circulation, their heart, and all of those, the nervous system, everything's slowed down to such a rate. You don't need much of the physical body. That's how some of these Indian gurus go on for 3 or 4 days without breathing, or one breath, that's how they do it. And so as a student in the very beginning, you've got to get used to that, because some of us are not always used to being relaxed that much. And it can actually be a little bit scary where you think, oh, I don't know what's happening to me. You often hear students in the beginning say, and they've got their hands together and they go, I can't separate my hands. And you can see the fear, because they think they're going to be stuck like that for the rest of their lives, And you have to say, just move your fingers and your toes. It's your circulation. That's all it is. But they think because they've gone heavy and they can't move, they feel they're locked, and they're not. It's just circulation, But it's just learning to take it easy. And remember, there's no time limit. You've got eternity to get this right. That's the thing. So as long as you have that focus, discipline, and intention is everything in this work. Once you have that intention, where you connect with the spirit world, you set your intention as to what you would like them to do with you, they will work with you in so many ways. But in the beginning, it might seem like how a kaleidoscope works. So if you think of a kaleidoscope, as you move it round, the pieces are the same, but the image is different all over and over again. Well, that's how it is with the spirit world. They're the same team, but they move around, if you like, or they move around within that sphere in order to get the best out of you. So they're also experimenting as well in the beginning to see what combination suits you the best.
Maria?
I had a question because I know this. I've heard it. I've heard it so many times
from
other people. So I thought it'd be nice for you to address the question. And the question is that I've heard from people is, you can't train online for trance. It's not going to work. It's not safe. They're going to take over your body. So how do you respond? Have you heard that? Because I've heard that a lot.
No, I haven't, but probably because nobody wants to tell me that.
I'm like, what?
It is the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard. Because the great thing is about trance is that it's about a state of mind. It doesn't matter whether you're in the room. It doesn't matter if I'm working online. But when I first started, and we all know that COVID was the great, inventor, if you like, of this work, as far as we're all, so used to it now. But I remember at the time thinking, how am I going to work? Because I hadn't been used to, I'd always worked in the room. And I remember thinking when I was my first time working online, I thought, I can actually see energy just the same as I can in the room. I can feel your energy from here, and you're a long way away from me, It doesn't make any difference. I mean, the connection we have, the spiritual connection, is instant. It is with everybody on this planet. So it doesn't make sense to me. I'm so sorry. It doesn't make sense. I do a lot of trance teaching online. I would say 99% of my teaching is online.
Okay, then. So for those of you that are listening or watching this video, I hope this puts your mind at ease.
Yeah. And the great thing is, and the thing is, I have never yet I'm going to tell you, as you introduced me, as a demonstrator of mediumship, I've been working over 40 years in this work as a medium. And in all those years, I've never heard one person, and please remember, I do this job a lot. I've never heard one individual from the spirit world regret where they are. Never once has anyone said to me, I want to be back in your world. Yes, they may regret what they've done in this world. That's a different story. But nobody wants to come back. And I've never had one incident where somebody in the spirit world that wasn't bona fide, if I leave it at that, has connected with me, or I've had any negative issues with anyone from the spirit world. Because if I did, I don't know how I would do this job or this work, because opening my mind to a force that I would be wary of, not comfortable with, how could I relax and go into the trance state, knowing there was a potential to do me harm? Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Not at all. And I've never, ever experienced it. And you may say, well, lucky you. And I may be lucky, but I've never experienced it. And I've never experienced anyone that has either.
Yeah.
So
I was just going to ask Simone, how long can people stay in a trance state for and be authentically connecting?
I would say probably about an hour, and maybe an hour and a quarter, something like that. Not too much. It is possible. I mean, I'm trying to remember watching other people, but it's possible to be maybe an hour and a half. I don't know. But most people would not want to be that long, maybe an hour, hour and a quarter, something like that. Yeah, is enough.
And is there any physical effects that you feel after you've been in the trance state for that long?
No, there is when you've been working online with it, because of the light of the computer. When you come back, that is what hurts me, is the light on my eyes of the computer. I did have a screen thing on the front of my computer for a couple of years, because to try and sort of filter that light. But that's the only thing. It's just like somebody shining a torch in your face, basically. It's not going to hurt you. It's just uncomfortable. That's the only issue. And I know that in the past, I mean, I'm going back a long way, but in the past, the trance mediums of my sort of generation, they would be led into the room and everybody was to keep quiet, no clapping, they got to keep still, and you mustn't wear any jewelry and stuff like that. It's a load of rubbish, but anyway, they were brought in and it was all about drama, basically. It was about building up the drama, and then when they were led out of the room, it was like they were very precious and they were held and guided out of the room and so on. Listen, you don't need any of that. Once you're back, you're back. You can get up and go, so you don't need any of the drama.
Well, I actually think that's less frightening to hear, really, because if you look at or read any of the stories, I mean, that does put you off trance, or personally. That sense of absolute loss of control. You're out to it, you're gone, you're stumbling.
You've always got control. You've always got control. Your choice is whether you want to come back or not. Most of us don't, but that's the choice. But if there was a loud noise, you'd come back. One of the things I learned from that was, because it does happen, because life happens. And my father was very much he was an engineer, but he was an engineer with deep sea divers for a particular part of his life. And I learned, when they come up too quickly, they get the bends and blah, blah, blah. Well, I learned from him that with trance, if you come up too quickly, you become very disorientated, because you've changed your state of thinking, and you think you haven't gone anywhere, if you like, and you open your eyes and you're disorientated. And I learned from him that if you go back into the trance state, go to the level that you were at and come up very, very slowly, you'll be fine. because it can be a shock to the system when you come out. In the same way as if you were at the sink washing up and I went boo behind you, that could frighten you. It's the same kind of feeling, you know. It's not pleasant. It's not going to kill you, but it's not pleasant, you know. And we've all been there. We've all come back too quickly. And that's the great thing about trance, is you don't know how far you've gone until you try to come back. And you think you're very superficial until you, and then you realize, hang on a minute, it's taken me a bit longer than I thought, you know. But it's the most amazing feeling, because in that power, when you're in the trance state, there's all sorts of things going on. It's not just energy. There's healing, there's an influence, there's help, there's support, there's encouragement, there's motivation. There's all sorts of things going on in that energy to help you, if you allow the power to work with you. It's your choice.
Wow. I am curious, has teaching trance changed over the years, or is it still taught the same way?
I don't know. I can't answer that, because I don't hear other people teach it. So I don't know. But I know that I've changed. I hope I have.
Yeah.
Because obviously the more you work, the more refined your work becomes, you know, as it does in every profession, you know. And yeah. I hope I have changed, you know. I mean, I just know that I have got very little patience in terms of, if I want to do something, I want to do it now. I don't want to wait a fortnight or 3 weeks, you know. I was at the back of the queue when they handed that one out. But I just know that the work with the spirit is so transformational. That's what it does. It transforms you. That connection you have in that trance state changes you. It's almost like it gives you your own sacred space. It helps you find yourself. It helps you see the purpose of that connection between you and them. It's not just me with my eyes closed speaking. That's not what it's about. To me, it's all about the presence. You're feeling the power. You're feeling more than just the words. It has to be more than that. Otherwise, why bother? Why go to all of that? It's got to be so much more than that. But it is all about yourself, in terms of, if you're listening to the trance state, being in the power, it brings about a connection that brings everyone together. Not just you and the spirit, but that power brings everyone together. And you can feel that sense. That's why when we meet people especially within spiritualism, and we find that connection can often be a lifetime connection with that individual, because it's not just them, it's the spirit within them as well. And that's what I enjoy about it, because it doesn't matter how much you know, but you'll never know enough. There's always something else to learn.
Simone, listening to you speak with such passion about your work, and that's tangible. It's like, you know, when you speak, it's there, the love, the feeling, all the senses. How do you maintain that after 30 years of teaching this? I mean, were there moments when you were thinking, gosh, I think I've done my bit for the spirit world, I'll step back and Simone will have her ordinary day life? Or
I think, to be honest, I am probably the luckiest person in the world, because I really love my job. I love my work. The only time I don't is when people don't appreciate what they do. But that's it. But I love my job, and I love my work. I'm never sick of it. Never. Yeah, we can all get tired. That's a different story. But I never wake up in the morning thinking, oh no, not working with the spirit world again. You know, I've worked with a few employers that I've felt like that about in my time, when I had what I call a proper job. Yeah. But no, I just love the work. And it doesn't matter to me if the person listening to this works within this field full-time, part-time, once a week, once every 2 weeks. that power is going to be there for them. And it can be that as circumstances, I'm sure lots and lots of people will relate to the fact that they don't have the time to spend that they would like. I've been there when I had small children, so you've got to fit in, you've got to get the balance of the two worlds. You can't just live in the spirit world, you've got to live in this world. That's what we're here for. But it's finding that balance within us that's important. And knowing
Simone,
that, yeah.
Sorry, Simone, to interrupt.
No, it's right.
It made me just think then, because I don't, what age did you move into this? You said you're an atheist because you speak with such passion, but have you been surrounded by people that support what you do?
Oh, you're joking. The complete opposite. No, I have. My mum was quite psychic, but she was absolutely scared of it. My father had investigated spiritualism with a friend of his, and they went around all these circles in the late 50s, which was obviously after the war, and there was a lot of fraud around at that time, and he was convinced that it was rubbish, so I couldn't even talk to him. And in my father's later years, he became a very strong or devout Christian, so we just learned not to talk about any kind of religion. That's how we managed. My mum passed quite young, so this was all before her. This all came after her passing. I have my two children. I'm a grandmother, and my two children, they both know what I do. They never ever talk to me about it, except my son will walk in the door and say, "Hi mum, how's the dead world?" And I go, "Busy," and that's the end of our conversation. My daughter thinks I'm the finder of lost property. That's all I do in my life, so that's it. But to me it doesn't matter, because I have and please don't take this the wrong way, I really don't think that I'm privileged or special or anything like that. But I do believe that we come into this when it's the right time for us. And it's not their time. And I don't mind, because they'll know when their time is right. And it might be when they get to the spirit world, that's their time. Who knows? But it doesn't matter to me. It's not important, because we've got a good relationship. But it doesn't matter to me that I don't have, that I have their support. If I know that if I was hurt or upset, they would be there. But I don't need their support in this. I have my friends who are mediums and healers, and we all support each other. That's how it works.
Oh, wow. So here's another question I just thought of, because people ask me this a lot over the years. Channeling, is it the same as trance? I've heard this be debated out. So what is your opinion?
I don't know what it is. I don't actually know what channeling is, because some people, it depends on where you live. For instance, I think the word channeling came from the States. So when you talk to me in the UK about channeling, I'm not sure whether you mean trance or whether you mean, I don't mean you personally, I mean, in the States, I don't know whether people mean trance or whether they mean communication. It's a word. I actually don't know what it means to them, what that means. But what it does make me laugh, it makes me laugh when people use it, because I have this vision of the spirit world trying to get into a drain pipe and channeling themselves right down this drain pipe, making themselves as small as possible. I'm not sure if that's right, but I don't know I honestly don't know what that means. But I have to ask every time somebody uses the word, what do you mean by that? And I don't mean to be challenging. I really don't know what they mean.
Oh, I like that you said that, because I think depending where we grow up, different cultures, country you grow in, people use different words to describe the same thing. So I like that. Miss Dina, did you have a question?
Well, I did a little bit off from channeling, but different talk that throughout the world, and different takes on trance as such. Is it necessary to know your guides?
No.
Okay.
I have to battle with that all the time. No, and the reason is because, if you can just bear with me, I consider, and this is my my thoughts, my understanding. But please remember, that doesn't mean that I think I'm always right, not at all. But this is what I believe today. But ask me tomorrow, you might get a different answer. That's all I'm going to say. But what I think is that the system of guides and helpers is very much like mainstream education. You go into your first school with a set of teachers that get you to a particular point of your development. Then you go into the next school with another set, and so on until you get to further education, you know. So in other words, like I said earlier, you wouldn't teach an infant university maths, you know, you've got to go through the system. I think the same with the spirit world. And I was the one years ago, I would have been the one that would be, if I gave you a reading, I would tell you what guides you'd got and so on. You know, I wouldn't do that now, not at all, because the spirit world has taught me differently. They've taught me that, you know, when we see, you know, the stereotypical American Indian, the Chinese guide, the nun, you know, I can give you a busload like that, but they're actually archetypes for the energy around an individual. That's what they taught me. And now I'm just interested in the spirit team. I haven't a clue who works with me. Not a clue now. I used to think I did, you know, but now they have taught me that I don't need to personalize them. That's the point. Because when you personalize, you become possessive. And then it's almost like they're on your shoulder. And you can't make your own decisions, because I believe that we are our best guides.
So, is that just an aspect, do you think, of the human ego, the need to put a bow on it, put a name on it, in order to understand a felt presence or a shift of energetic state or vibration?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you get rid of that, the limitations and restrictions that you place on yourself, on ourselves, because of that, and you think, I've got a spirit team, I can tell you when they're close. They will tell me if I've done something they think I shouldn't have done, or said something I shouldn't have said. You know, that's the relationship I have. I don't need to know exactly who it is who said it. It's the fact that we all work together for the same purpose. That's what's most important to me.
Well said, Simone. So when you said, because I actually came in with that thought belief myself, I wasn't really interested in knowing the spirit team. When I started out mediumship development, everyone can say, I think I've got, and this is who's with me again, and now it's changed. And everyone seemed to want to have this magical construct of who was working with them. I just wanted to know that I was supported in the work that I did. So
absolutely. And that in itself is very freeing. It really is very freeing, because then you're able to use your mind in a much wiser way. So in other words, you think beyond. Because if you start to think that there's a guide with you, that is very limiting, where you're just with a guide. But if you think that you're with hundreds, because I believe you are, you know, not just with one or two, I believe you've actually got hundreds of guides, you know, and I prefer the word influences, I've got to be honest, you know, because guide makes me think I can't do anything by myself, you know, I can't think for myself, I've got to be told what to do. But I just feel that we're able to move away from those restrictions to go beyond that ideal, you know. And once we realize that, yes, to a degree we're looked after, but no more than anyone else on this planet. That's the point. Otherwise, we're going to end up belonging to an elite club, which is not fair.
Simone, sorry, rather. Do you have any current writings or books?
No, I swore I'd never write a book.
Because I know with Glenn Edwards too, he didn't have the sort of books. I think he had a co-writer for one as well.
Yes, he did. A guy who was a great friend of his called Santishan or something like that. Anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
Santishan,
but I can only say, not having had the privilege of working with him, having read his books, how priceless his writings were for me in my development of mediumship. So I'm just planting a seed.
I've been asked a lot, but it's just, I'm such a pedantic person. So I can't just write 1 or 2 lines. I've got to examine that for about, 3 weeks before I move on to the next 2. It's just hard work. So yes, I take the lazy way out, but I think it's important that people realize that they're individuals. We don't want clones in this movement. It's so important to me that people realize their own potential. They find that power within them, that spark that ignites them and they can follow their heart in that, because don't have to wait for someone else to tell you that you're great at mediumship or you're great at healing, because that's going to do is feed an ego. Yes, you need to know, am I right for it? The only way to find out if you're right is to try it. And then if it sits comfortably, you're right. And if it doesn't, you think, no, I'm not sure I enjoyed that, then don't do it. Do something else. There's plenty of work within this work for all sorts of people, all different aspects, from creative, to, as you say, writing, to trance, to mediumship. The intuition side or intuitive side is so important. Understanding where that person is and what's holding them back in life, it's important. It's not just about being told by the spirit, but allowing ourselves to listen to their spirit and see what they need. There's a lot of areas that we can cover in this work. And that's why I like it, because it's so varied. You can't get bored. You really can't get bored.
Yeah.
I always think bored people are boring.
There's so much to do here. Here's one of the questions I like to ask my guests when they're here is, for somebody that is brand new to this journey and they feel drawn to the trance states, they don't really know, they have no clue what they're doing, what would you recommend they start first?
First of all, to look to see if they can find a reputable teacher. That could be online. And again, I think one of the best ways to develop trance is to just be with a friend who has to be honest, they have to be sympathetic to what you do. You can't work with somebody who's not. But find a friend where maybe they're interested as well. So this is how I developed. It wasn't online, it was in the room, but it's the same thing where, I would go into trance and she would watch me, and then she would go into trance and I would watch her. But you want a good friend and an honest friend that says, yeah, I like what you did, but I thought what you did last time was better. Because you've got to remember, the spirit world is trying to experiment with us all the time to see what combinations are best for us, But that would be what I think. And I think also just don't just latch onto anyone that teaches. Look to see who they are, see their backgrounds, and see how long they've been working for, how long they've been teaching for. As well. And it doesn't mean that they've got to teach for 30 years. I don't mean that. But it's just, you don't want somebody who's just started in the last couple of days or last week, Yeah. Somebody who's got some kind of reputation as well. Because you have to trust. That's the point. And it's a big trust as well. Because, where else in life would you trust anybody, getting that close and having that much influence in what we do that could be, could make or break you, basically. So you need that. But I would always recommend people sit on their own. Practice with someone else, because but I would say sit on your own, get yourself relaxed, ask the spirit world to lead you into the trance state, and then ask them to speak through you on an area of philosophy that they decide, not you, and then record it on your phone. And then when you finish, if you can face listening to your own voice, because most of us can't bear that, listen to the recording and see how much of it you remember. And maybe the first time you remember all of it. And the second time you remember 95%, and so on. But gradually you'll go less and less and less. And that, for me, would be the way I would recommend somebody develop.
So for trance, because I'm just curious, and I know our listeners are going to wonder too, because I always hear about the voice changing.
That often happens in the beginning of your development. It's almost like a way of the spirit world reassuring the medium that they're not speaking from their own voice. But as you move on in your development, that goes, and then you're with your own voice.
Oh, that's so fascinating how that happens.
Because they need to, if you like, they need to find a way of making you believe that it's not all you. And I actually believe in, when we first start with trance, I believe it's 97% us and 3% spirit. Okay. But as you practice, that ratio changes. That's the point. And that's why it's sitting regularly. I don't mean every day. I wouldn't do that. But even if it's just once a week for 20 minutes, half an hour maximum, that's enough. That would do it. But don't think when you stop that your development stops, because it doesn't. It keeps going on despite you. And that's what I love about it. Once you've lit that flame, if you like, once you've set yourself off, there's no turning back.
Dana, did you have a question?
After my coughing attack. I was going to ask, you would have worked with some other trance healers perhaps in your time. Is there any standout memory that you have around that?
Oh, crikey. I've worked with so many. I remember once, this was a group, and it was a group I was taking at the Arthur Findlay College many years ago. And there was, and the whole group was healing. We were all going into the power and stuff. And there was this elderly man on the course who'd got a very twisted spine, and he was really bent over. And we were all giving him healing, and you could see his spine straighten, and everybody could see it. It wasn't just, one person could. Everybody could see it. I think that's one that stood out for me the most. Obviously, there's millions more, because the one thing the spirit world has taught me is that whenever there's a lot of us together, a group together, that's the time where we should be focusing on healing, because that group power does so much good, and not just to an individual, but to the world. And I love the, teaching people about self-healing and trance self-healing, trance abstinent healing, all of those things. I love it. I've just seen so many things happen that are so good, and I don't mean just from me, I mean from the people I'm with, as well.
So how would that look, Simone? How would that look for someone if you're in a group online, and then it's setting an intention for someone in the group that requires healing?
Yeah.
And then allowing yourself to go into the trance state?
Yeah, absolutely. Or they will say, somebody might say, oh, my mum's not well at the moment. So we all think of the mum at the same time. And going into the trance state, and then we get the feedback. That's what's important. And this all came about because I was doing a week on trance and teaching a course, and then we did some healing, and the group asked me, can we do this every single day? And I said yes. And it was only half an hour a day out of a whole day, but I said yes. And from that group, every day we would do the healing, and then they would ring home and see if everybody was okay and all of that. Next day, we had so many reports on, wow. And, not just individuals, but families, because we would be thinking of families too, because families go through crises as well, and the difference it made, because we got numbers there that were all thinking at the same time, not all going off on our own, thinking of each individual that we know, but bringing them to the group, the idea of them, the name, just their first name, nothing, too invasive. And And then just thinking that the feedback we had was remarkable, and it taught me a lot about how we have to use those times, even if it's, as I say, 20 minutes in a day. When you
Someone, would you then, I'm trying to understand this. So with the intention set for a person with their name, would you have to know their condition as such?
No, not at all. No, not at all. The spirit world I work with is an intelligent world. They don't need to know that. They don't need to know, that, because we also know that in today's society, there's quite a lot of us suffer from psychosomatic illnesses. So, if I've got a problem with my foot because of the way I'm thinking, there's not much point in me having healing on my foot. It's my mind that needs healing. So we're not the right people to see where the root of that problem is. I just think that the spirit world is that intelligent. They know where the healing is needed. They see us in a different way, to just the physical,
Wow. I'm wondering, do you have a favorite part of trance? Is it more the healing? Is it the philosophy?
I think I love all of it, but I have to say the one part of it that's closest to my heart is trance communication, where loved ones speak directly to loved ones through me, because that brings about such an emotion. And I've always considered myself an emotional wreck. Okay, so I'm going to put that out there. But when I work with trance communication, because I'm not part of it, if you like, I've taken a step back within myself, I don't feel the emotion of it, so it doesn't affect me in that way. But when you come back and you see everybody's crying with the emotion in the room, then you go, wow, because it hasn't touched you, because you're not allowing yourself to be in the room, if that makes sense, But yeah, it's something that, because it's what the spirit world says to us, and because of what they want to say rather than what we think as mediums they want to say. That's the difference. They can say directly what they want to say. That's what I love about it.
That is awesome. Do you ever remember anything you see, or it's remember nothing?
I remember the beginning,
yeah,
and I remember the end. When I'm going in and when I'm coming out. Yeah. And you can see how the effect of how it changes people. That's what I love about it, because they can come and sit there and they look stiff and all the rest of it, and then by the time it's finished, they've just melted, and it's just lovely to see the impact that has on people. And yeah, it's very special to me, and in terms of how I see it, because it's just it's so much more personal. That's the thing. Yeah. I don't mean to the point of divulging inner confidences. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But the effect is on everybody in the room. That's the point. Everybody. I could go into trance and somebody could speak through me to you, but the whole room is there, and it will affect everybody in the room.
Yeah.
And that's what I love.
That is amazing.
Yes, Simone, I was just going to ask, for those that are listening and starting out in their spiritual journey, if there was one thing that you could say to a potential spiritualist or medium or trance medium to keep them on the path or encourage them along the path, what would that be? What would that advice be?
I think first and foremost, I don't normally give advice, but I've got lots of opinions, but millions. But I would say, be true to yourself. And if you don't enjoy it, please don't do it. Don't enjoy it. Don't do it just because everybody else is telling you you have to. Be your own person, and just try, if you can, to be to try everything. Don't limit yourself. Don't restrict yourself with anything. Try absolutely everything before you make up your mind the path that you want to go down, you know, because very often I hear so many people say, I want to be a healer. Yeah, but all areas of mediumship are healing, because healing is the foundation of everything we do. Then you've got to ask yourself, well, what type of healing do you want to do? You know, and I just feel that out there, there's just so much that we can learn from every facet of it. For me, I'm not at all creative. So the area that I don't go down is art, because I know that's a joke for me. You know, I just can't draw. I can't even draw stickmen. But I know my limitations in that way. But I also know that if I hadn't looked into other areas like trance spiritual assessments, which is something I do, or trance guidance, or just even working, I work a lot with, as I said earlier, with intuition, which is not in trance. I love all of it, just love all of it. But you've got to find your own way, your own style. Find what suits you best, and not just because everybody else is saying, oh, you'd be a great this or great that. Look to see what you want to do, how you feel about it, and how much time you can afford to give it. Because it depends on your home. Sometimes if you've got a family, it can be hard, especially if you've got a young family. It can be hard finding a bit of time to do that. But just always remember, there's always tomorrow, because there'll be a day when you can have time to do what you want to do. But just enjoy it. Don't just endure it. That's what I would say.
That is
wise words.
Yes, wise words to live by. So we are coming to the end of our time together. I do want to say before we go, I actually met Simone a few years ago on Journey Within, and it was a trance speaking class. I was like, and I'm in the class. You were so amazing at answering people's questions and being so clear, and I felt so safe.
Oh, thank
I
you.
love that. And because I've been in other trans class where like the teachers get annoyed. I am that student that asks 5,000 questions.
No, I love it. I love that,
Yeah.
because I think that's how you learn. I
And you
really do.
embrace that. And you were like, no questions dumb. Ask whatever you guys want. And
Yeah.
I walked away so empowered. And it was a workshop online. I walked away so empowered, and I just remember, wow, she's so amazing. So I want to put
Oh,
it out there. If you guys are looking to study trance and you're like, oh, I'm interested, but I don't really know, highly recommend Simone. She's incredible. And would you like to share with our listeners any new things? Like, I know you're coming to Canada, British.
I can't remember the dates, but it's the end of September. And it's the last week of September, and I go home on the 1st of October. And I'm working with a lovely lady called Ricky Ativan.
Oh, I know Ricky. She's
Oh,
awesome. Yes.
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 And I'm working with her for a week on trance in her center. So if anybody wants to get in touch with her, or I know she'd be very happy to share details. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm doing that. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Because I will put that information down below in this video. So if you're watching or listening to it, just look at the show notes. I will have Simone's website up, and then also know that she has a lot of classes coming up. So go onto her website and click and choose what feels right, just like she said. And
Great.
oh, excuse me, Dina, any last words before we go?
No, I just wanted to thank you so much, Simone, for your time. I found it personally fascinating. It's not an area that I've dived into, but I am keen in the future to explore that. As you said, don't limit your spiritual potential.
Yeah.
And I love that. So thank you for your time. And thank you, Maria, for having me once on again. I love spending that hour with you and whatever guest you have on, especially today, Simone. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you both so much. You've been a pleasure to be with. Thank you so much. I've really, really loved it.
Oh, we absolutely loved it. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Great. Okay.
Bye.